Hello, and welcome to More Than Set Dressing, Female Craft Heads on World Building, a partnership between Women in Film and HBO Max. I'm Ebony Adams, Manager of Public Programs for Women in Film. We are tremendously excited to have gathered an incredible host of talent to join us in today's conversation on the art and craft of filmmaking, and we're especially pleased to feature all of these women as part of our efforts to highlight the genius of female production and costume design. Their discussion is part of a diverse slate of programming comprising our WIF TV Summit, sponsored by Amazon Studios, Prime Video, and HBO Max. The summit's devoted to shining a spotlight on the female creatives changing our media landscape and deserving of industry recognition. And there's so many offerings during the summit that we hope you check out. We know that you'll find today's roundtable discussion fascinating and illuminating. And as we look forward to the 2021 Emmys race, we hope that you seek out the work and the projects you'll be hearing about. And if you're an Academy voter, we encourage you to vote for women. I'd like to introduce our panel today. Please welcome Heidi Bivens, known for her work on Inland Empire, mid-90s, and for costumes on Euphoria. Luana Hanson from Last Tango in Halifax, Secret Diary of a Call Girl, and production designer for It's a Sin. Kalina Ivanov, whose films include Little Miss Sunshine, Long Shot, Grey Gardens, and who led production for Lovecraft Country. Gemma Jackson, known for her work on Game of Thrones, The Gentleman, and Aladdin, and who led production design for The Nevers. Lynsey Moore from Anne Boleyn, Chewing Gum, and costume designer for I May Destroy You. And Emma Potter, whose work includes True Detective, Creed, and who designed costumes for Perry Mason. Today's conversation will be moderated by award-winning journalist Stacey Wilson Hunt, a producer and host who spent the last decade covering Hollywood for The Hollywood Reporter, New York Magazine, and Fortune. Stacey, I'll turn it over to you.
And thank you to everyone who is here. Just hearing your credits, wow, what a wealth of experience, and also just across so many genres, which I always find to be such an incredible testament to artistry and training. So congratulations first on surviving to this point in your careers. This is a hard life. I think we can all agree. It's so nice to see everyone. And I was speaking a little bit earlier about women in film and sort of the theme of mentorship. And I would love for each of you to reflect on how mentorship has figured into your career and who early on in your life served in that capacity for you, whether it be a man or a woman, and at what stage in your career that took place. So feel free, anyone, to jump in. I want this to be very loose. I don't want anyone to feel like they're on the spot.
I think I've been quite fortunate to have a few mentors along the way to kind of, guide me to where I am at this point. There's one woman early in art class in the UK that my family had moved over to the States before me, and she kind of was somebody who had encouraged me to move over to America and pursue art, and from a very young age encouraged creativity and exploring art in different means, whether it be painting or sculpture within high school. And I think having that kind of freedom and someone pushing you to create in that means left me open to continue to explore art and this more creative outlet as a career path along the way. I worked with two designers, Hope Hannafin and Suturat and Larlarb, who were both really strong in different capacities and helped me kind of figure out how I would want to approach design as well.
So I love that. So for you, mentorship really was more about creative inspiration as opposed to specific to your craft.
Yeah, I would say so. It's that idea that you can be free to create.
Right. And also just choose to make that your life's work as opposed to worrying about, am I going to make money?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which of course is always a concern, but for a lot of us, it doesn't drive our career decisions. And I think that's what's really inspiring too. Thank you so much for sharing that. And maybe let's go to Heidi next. What about your mentorship experience?
I have two mentors who have supported me throughout my career. Amy Roth, she's the niece of Anne Roth, and she's a costume designer, very accomplished. And I met her in my early days of New York at the dog run. I would go walk my dogs in Washington Square Park, and she would too. And I met her there, and I was in school for filmmaking, and I was in college at the time, and didn't know anyone in film, and didn't have an in. And so, when I started talking to her and learned that she was working in costumes, we just developed a friendship. And through the years, we've stayed in touch, and it's so fun to be able to support each other. She's on a project in New Orleans right now. I just saw her in Los Angeles. I mean, this is like spanning 20 years, this friendship. And she just texted me because she was like looking for some kind of costume resource that she thought I might have, and I was able to share some resources with her. So it's been this incredible journey with her where, you know, we've been able to now help each other in our careers. You know, where in the beginning, you know, I hadn't worked on a film at all when I would ask her a million questions, and we actually, we never have worked on a project together. She's just always been someone I can call, especially regarding now like rates and negotiating. It's great to have someone to be able to call, you know, for that. And then my other mentor, who I actually haven't spoken to in a while, now you're making me think it's time I need to reach out, is Janty Yates, and she's fantastic. And I met her at a time in my life where I was trying to navigate the industry and figure out, you know, how to choose projects and you know what types of creators, collaborators I wanted to work with, and she's been a great shoulder to lean on in that way. So yeah, I've been very blessed to have these two very strong women in my life, and super thankful for that.
Oh, and we also have to thank your dog too. Without that, you wouldn't have at least one of those friendships.
Yes, it was fated.
Dogs are wonderful, as we know. Thank you, Heidi. That's really great. It also speaks to the long relationships that mentorships can be, not just a point in time, but really enduring. And I think that's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add real quick that, you know, because of that, now I look for people to mentor. I actively look, you know, because I think, that's so important to be able to do the same thing for someone else. Yeah.
Well, and on that note, Kalina, we were speaking before about this exact subject. You said that you have taken some women or possibly men under your wing. Tell me about first your mentorship experience as a young person and how you've translated that to helping others.
Well, my story is a little different only because I went to theater school at NYU, the theater design department. And even at the time when I told them I wanted to study set design, they said, "Are you sure you don't want to do costumes?" Because simply women were supposed to do costumes. Right. And we were only 2 women set designers in the entire program. So very early in my career, my mentors were always men. There were no women even in theater. There was only one, and she happened to be married to a big Broadway producer, and that was it. And once they got divorced, that was it for her career.
Oh,
and
no.
Literally, that was the world that I had entered. And so what was really interesting is these early mentorships as an artist are so important because you really forming new ideas. And I was very lucky to have the master teacher at the program be Oliver Smith, who is an incredible gentleman and a brilliant designer, theater designer, Broadway designer, very well known for all his musicals. What was fascinating about our friendship and mentorship is that I knew nothing about musicals. I had just escaped from Bulgaria. That was not even a genre allowed to, because it's one of those American genre, wasn't even allowed to be talked about, let alone put on a production. So I had zero understanding of musicals and struggled tremendously with it. And we made a deal that I will do opera because I convinced him that Mozart was just the same thing as musicals, since they talked and they sang, and it was the same thing. Right. So and he was so generous, and he just really wanted to develop each person's individuality. So I was very lucky because I ended up doing Magic Flute instead of a complete utter failure at Company. Big Stephen Sondheim musical. I couldn't even understand the music.
It's a tough one. It's a tough musical.
Yeah, it's a tough musical anyway. But we had a tremendous. As I said, what is so important in those instances is that your teacher actually realizes what your shortcomings are, and instead plays to what you are strong at and develops that with you. And we had a very, very good relationship, and I learned a lot. I learned to use a 2B pencil. And what I also learned from musicals, which I use to this day, is how to cram a lot of scenery on a stage, because Broadway theater is incredibly shallow. So I learned a lot of things. And then I ended up doing the show Smash, because eventually I evolved to the point where I actually enjoy and love musicals. But it was a bumpy ride. And then at the beginning, and and then the next mentor that I had was another very distinguished gentleman, a cinematographer. And this is really interesting. And this came through the fact that I broke into the film industry as a storyboard artist. I met Nestor Almendros, who is a very famous cinematographer. He did Days of Heaven, Sophie's Choice, really beautiful cinematographer in person. But we bonded on our experience of escaping communism, because he escaped from Cuba and I did from Bulgaria. And it was a very profound relationship, just intellectually and visually. And so to bring back the question to how that affected me in terms of my mentorship is what I realized, that I didn't have any role models. I didn't have any female mentors. So like in the middle of the 90s, I thought to myself, why don't I take it upon myself to hire more women and mentor more women? And I also realized that there wasn't a lot of diversity in the art department. And I happened to have had 2 African-American students in my class. So I was teaching for a very short time at NYU. And so I started this thing of where I would just mentor people that had less of a chance of getting into the industry, because I thought, for me, it was very hard to get in as a foreigner. So that's been my mission since the mid-90s, and I'm still doing it.
I love that. My gosh, I feel like just that conversation could be a whole documentary series, everything you just shared. And it's so interesting you bring up your musical background and stage background, because I can see in Lovecraft Country, I can see that, the cramming in of a lot of scenery in each frame.
Yes.
I have a similar situation as before, because when I started out, there were really no women mentors in the film industry. And in fact, I went to art school and I was a very disgruntled art student. And I then fell into, I pursued theatre design, but I was very lacking in confidence and never thought in a million years I'd be able to be responsible for a stage, never mind a film. And I started a course with an amazing woman who was probably younger than me now, but I thought she was an old woman. And she was called Percy Harris. And she had this design course. And my whole life just clicked literally into within weeks. I knew that I loved pavements, high heels, jam jars, walls. I knew everything was fascinating, but I could never find a way to make these things. They didn't work with my painting. So my whole life actually at that point went into gear with this extraordinary woman sort of behind me, pushing me through. And I did theatre for a long time, like you did. And it was exciting, and it was tough, and it was the 70s, and it was a lot of political theatre. There was a huge amount of all the things, all this Me Too and all the rest of it. I mean, my God, what we all had to go through to get to where we are today. And then I literally fell into film. I mean, actually, that was probably through a really lovely designer in this country called Jamie Leonard, who sort of put me up for something and sort of said, they want a woman, there's no women designers, and they want to, well, why don't you do it? And I was going, yeah, right, great, I'll do it, And that was really my kind of thing, was that I'm quite enthusiastic. I always was. I was frightened at that stage, but I think just by having the kind of guts to have a go, kind of probably helped me get to where I am now. And similarly, I'm making a very conscious effort to be a mentor. I've been mentoring kind of unofficially, I suppose, for a while, and I think it's quite a complicated process. I think it's great if you can just stick to work, but people need so much more from you sometimes, and it can be quite emotional sort of entanglement. And so I've started doing it through sort of various organizations in this country, which I'm finding is much more structured, and I find in a way I can give more to them rather than just going, oh my God, you poor thing, you help, oh, you can't pay your rent, oh, what are we going to do? It's actually becoming a much more structured relationship, which I'm really enjoying, and I think they're getting more out of it too. But yeah, there really weren't that many mentors around when I was a youngster.
mine kind of began really at art college when I did fashion and textiles, a degree in fashion and textiles at Liverpool. And knowing I loved fashion and textiles, but it kind of wasn't completely, my singing soul. I knew I wanted to get involved in film and TV. But we had a visiting lecturer there called Jane Buswell, who used to do these big events at Westway Studios, which was in Shepherd's Bush at the time. And she used to invite a few of us down there during the holidays to do all the scenic artwork for them. So I then got involved in event design because of her. So I used to paint all these huge, great big backings. And one we did was for Michael Jackson's LP, which was the Dangerous one. It was an award that he was going to win at the Savoy Hotel. And we did all the set design for it. So me and two others painted this huge, great big backing, which was the cover of Dangerous. And through washing some brushes out at a sink, I met a guy called David Bill, who had a big studio a big office at Shepperton, and he had a company called BBRK, and they used to do a lot of commercials. And through washing my paintbrushes and just talking to him, he was in the studio adjacent and doing a commercial. And he said, "Hey, why don't you just come and show me your portfolio, and then we can have a look at it and go from there." And literally, I showed him my work, and then he took me on as his assistant, and he really sort of started to carve my career in that way. I spent a couple of years with him, learning everything from technical drawing to visuals to how a set was run, how a set was built. And he literally put a lot of responsibility on you when you knew very little. And I sort of ran with it because I was so eager and keen and passionate about it. And then I applied to the Royal College of Art, and I got in to do film design for film and film and TV, and did that for 2 years, did an MA for 2 years. And then after that, I came out and I worked with the lovely Caroline Ames. So she was another great inspiration. And that's really how I sort of started off. And then talking about mentors, what I've sort of been thinking of recently is, and what I've been making inquiries about, is actually going into schools to sort of inform people about the kind of careers that we all have. Because I think TV was sort of in the dark a lot, especially when I was at school. No one ever came in to talk about those sort of careers. So I'm about to start embarking on that, really, to start meeting people and meeting students and showing them the way, really, if people are interested, just as an option for a career. Because I was never shown it. I didn't even know anybody who worked in TV and film. Even when I was doing my degree in fashion and textiles, I didn't know anybody, so it was really difficult. So yeah, that's really how I sort of started off, really.
I think for me, there was one person that's always really stood out in my career so far. I started off, I did a degree in costume, and I had some trainee roles for television. But I was very lucky. I managed to get a job while I was at university working for the Royal Opera House, where I met someone there, a costume supervisor called Zeb Lauci, who was the tiniest little Turkish woman, but the biggest character you've ever met. One of those people that everybody just loves, covered in brooches, pens everywhere, completely eccentric and in love with costume. And I'd come from a background where, where I grew up, people weren't arty. I lived in quite a narrow neighborhood, I suppose. And this was my introduction to the world of just being creative and having fun. And she taught me, obviously, all the side of things about making fabrics and, how to source things, which I think sometimes when you're a trainee in film or television, you sometimes don't get to see that side of things because you're not in with the design team. So completely opened my eyes. We had these amazing budgets that I could see everything, but it was more how she was that just inspired me completely, because this love of costume. And I mean, she'd be the last person in the office. Sometimes we'd be there 10, 11 o'clock at night, and she'd still be just as excited as she was in the morning about a trim that we'd found. And she was obsessed with vintage and trims and all kind of mad bits of treasure that we would go all over London scouting. And I think that's something she always instilled in me, is that we can have fun and that we should be looking for something different. And there was never, it was never too busy a day to stop and have a laugh and have a giggle and then carry back on again. And she was never too busy to stop and teach me something about something she thought, I should learn about some specific fabric or the history of this. And that's something I've always taken with me. And whenever I've been with my teams at my department, I always try to take time with my trainees and my team members to teach them things that I think they might want to know and learn from them. But, more importantly, to have a laugh. I do like to have a laugh at work, because I think that's important when you're creative, that if you've got to keep the energy positive, because the moment everything's serious, it makes it quite difficult, I think, to be freer and well, essentially creative. And so Zeb has always been this person for me. And what was really nice is last year when I did Anne Boleyn, it was my first period project. And it's, you know, I'm a contemporary designer. I was nervous about doing it. So I could ring her and say, look, you're the expert, all of these things. And it turns out because of the pandemic, she was off work, and she said that she'd come and assist me. So we did Anne Boleyn together, which was just incredible up in Yorkshire, having as much fun as we did years ago. And of course, because nobody knew her, she's not in the film or TV industry, everyone was just in love with her, the actors, the crew. She just made everybody happy. And she was teaching my girls and my team all these little tricks of the trade and secrets from dressing on theatre, which is so different when there's quick changes as to when there aren't, you know, for filming, we've got pauses. And it was just this real sort of energy on the track that we're all just transferring these skills and chatting. And she had all these stories that just every day fueled everyone because they were hilarious. And I think sometimes it's just a person and how they are that can just make a job and can really change it. And I think without her there and that constant buzz, I don't think we'd have been as playful with the designs, you know, as we were.
Thank you so much for sharing your mentorship experiences and contributions on that front. It's very motivating for everybody. I would love to talk about, what are the biggest misconceptions about what you do on set? I've been on a lot of sets. There's a certain energy, there are politics, there are lots of personalities, but I also find there's misunderstanding between departments. And I'm wondering, how do you bridge those gaps, and how do you help people better understand what it is exactly that you do all day?
I often get asked, like, you know, so you do all the clothes? And it's this idea that it's not just the lead actors, that you're also dressing all of the background as well. And right. On something kind of the scale of Perry Mason, the numbers were crazy. Like, there was so many background. And I did get asked that quite a lot, you know. And I think that that's just, the more that you talk about it, the more people kind of learn about the level of which you control or essentially design what is going into each of the frames, you know, be it the leads, be it the people far away, or the extra who's standing right next to your main actor. It's that level of kind of detail that is paid to every single thing in the frame. The idea that that has been considered and thought about, and is probably the result of many conversations and collaborations with other departments and cast and people within your own department. I think that's something that isn't often known, that I try to highlight when I'm talking about my work and other people's work within the industry.
Is it partially because I think we can all sort of identify with this idea of making it look easy, right? Where it's just sort of like all, you know, months of prep, and you show up and things are just flawless, and people just can't believe that maybe one person has really been driving that train the whole time. And then you just sort of make it look so simple. Do you think that's part of it, where you've done your job so well that it makes it look like you're not doing that much on set?
I'd like to say that I think for production designers, there's an incredible amount of ignorance about what we do. I mean, not only just with critics and what have you, and I've even talked to them about it, people, they really don't seem to understand, even within our, you know, within all our colleagues and stuff. I was doing The Borrowers, it's a long time ago now, but there was a wonderful film, and we built a whole outside of a house, the structure of a house with all the scaffolding behind in Chiswick. And the head makeup person came up to me and said, you know, I've lived around here for ages and I've never noticed that before. And she had to take her by the hand and take her around the back and show her. And she was just, and you just wonder what people who are all on, a lot of people are on set, I guess, and what they think we're doing when we're all exhausted and grey and falling down, building, painting, finishing, and making so many decisions all the time, every day. And it's quite astonishes me over and over again how people do not know, certainly what we do. I'm sure you ladies have found the same thing. I mean,
I agree with you totally. And I also think timing as well, when, you know, you'll be asked to kind of turn a set around in like an hour. You know, we had one on It's a Sin. We had 212 sets on that job. And we
Wow.
were in a theatre one day and we had to design a set for Les Mis, a set for Noel Coward Hay Fever, plus the corridor, plus all the dressing room for like 25 cast. And we had one day to film this in. So turning around 2 great big sets at the theatre, everything was built from scratch, everything was, and it's that concept where I think because we all do amazing jobs and it's flawless and everyone turns up and it's beautiful, people think it just miraculously appears. But like you say, it's all the thought, it's all the decisions. It's also executing all the timings as well. So the timings are immaculately, crafted so that nothing does go wrong and, everything slots into place. And
that's
huge jigsaw
your
puzzle.
job, isn't it? I think the things not going wrong and doing the turnaround is actually us all being good at our jobs. And if we'd know all about it if we weren't,
Yes, yeah.
So do you use these circumstances and opportunities to educate and teach? Because I have a feeling that once you get over the irritation of feeling as if people don't understand, is there a sense of, okay, maybe it's up to me to really just sort of educate this person or this cast member or whoever it is? This is my job. This is what I do. How about you, Kalina? Have you had those moments?
Well, yes. But I want to add that because of my show, Lovecraft Country, a lot of people in the press or in interviews seem to confuse the VFX with production design. And that is something that I find myself educating people over and over about, because we come so much ahead, and I do, and that's why I share all my sketches that I do, all the black and white sketches that show the volume, the design, all the architecture. And then I show the color concept sketch from the concept artist. And then I bring the point that this is done without any VFX people even on board yet. And that's the thing I think that is a big misconception amongst the general public, but including journalists, of understanding how much ahead we are in the conceptual part and how we're the leaders of the visual look. So even if it ends up in the hands of VFX at the end, but in post-production, the look of every single element has to be set from the very beginning. So I find myself, that's a big thing that I need to talk to people about. And I think in my show, Lovecraft Country, most of it was practical. We relied on VFX for the extensions and for, of course, things like, magical moments and things like that. But it's not as much as people think it, because really, I still believe that the actors, it's best for a production and a show to be as much real and in camera as possible.
Well, especially Kalina, your show is an homage to the pulpy sci-fi movies of the 50s. So it really wouldn't make sense to have like J.J. Abrams explosions in that setting, because it then takes us out of that kind of comic book based narrative that she's trying to create, Misha is trying to create.
Right. And at the same time, it's such a complex show because it also calls on real historical events. So at one hand, you have to do the 1950s science fiction, horror genre, pulp genre. On the other hand, you're talking about Black characters going through the Jim Crow America, surviving it, their real lives in that. And then you're recreating Emmett Till's funeral and 1921's destruction of Tulsa. So it was such an interesting, and all of that needs enhancement through VFX. But all of that, first and foremost, has to be thought through the prism of a production design point of view, and creating a world that makes sense with color and that hangs together. So don't end up particularly, I think what was so challenging about Lovecraft Country, you don't want to end up looking like 10 music videos strung together that they have nothing to do, that is trying to talk to each other, but they have nothing to do with each other. You actually want to create a palette and a point of view about the material, no matter where it goes, whether it goes 200 years back or 200 years into the future. You want to create a point of view and a palette. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge. And then, I was lucky with Misha saying, go bold. And that's music to my ears. Please give me bold shows. Sure. But
I love that. Well, I'd love to talk about that topic through the lens of these more contemporary set shows, Euphoria and I May Destroy You, where you have these very fashionable characters who sort of are artists themselves. And it's almost as if we think the actors have just dressed themselves and come to set, because they're so hip and so modern. So tell me a little bit about, and for the women who worked on those shows, how are you making that look organic and real, but also reminding the audience this has been very carefully curated? So maybe Lynsey, tell me about your experience.
I don't really think like that when I'm designing. It's never with the intention that I want people to notice my costumes. I think with contemporary, like I said, there's really the aim is to do the opposite. You want it to feel real, whatever the story is that you're telling, the narrative. It's about communicating the essence of a character, what they're feeling, what they're doing. So with I May Destroy You, for me, the design process was always about Arabella's journey, you know, who she was, what's happened, how she's feeling, this transition. So that was always, you know, the mindset behind my designs. Obviously, the nature of her character, she was an influencer, which meant all the time trying to create attention. She wanted to look a certain way. She had her own look, which then meant as a designer, they gave me the scope to be playful and bolder and perhaps, you know, come up with designs or things that were, you know, for another character would have seemed completely, you know, not plausible, would have seemed artificial, but for her, absolutely seemed right for her character. So I think with that, you know, obviously her costumes were noticed because they're quite different and outlandish in places, but it was never the intention that I wanted people to turn around and say, you know, look at all the work I've done.
Right.
But I think, you know, with that, it depends, like I said, completely on the script that you've got. And with all the characters I had, they were characters that wanted to be seen. They wanted to be noticed. So it was important for the audiences to notice the costumes and the way that they dress, because for these kids in the script, their identity and who they are is all about how they dress. You know, for many young people and for many creative types in London, they want to be seen. So it wasn't necessarily trying to educate the audience that these were costumes. It's about educating the audience about how these characters see themselves.
I love that. And the show has such a palpable energy. Obviously, Michaela's driving this entire process. And Heidi, I'd love to talk about Michaela sort of working with her on this, and then sort of how that extended to your experience on Euphoria, working with the actors and working with the creators, because again, there's such this strong drive from the creators because, and obviously the show is based on previous format, but it's really from his gut, right? It's from lived experience. It's from awakening that a lot of these people are having in their own lives too, in real life. How are you drawing from that and then infusing that into your designs?
In the very beginning, Sam Levinson, the show creator, he's the writer and the director of season 2, and he directed several episodes, season 1. It is his vision. But from the very beginning, from the pilot episode, he told me that he doesn't care about reality, and that, like, because I was trying to understand the tone, like, am I dressing these characters so that they reflect like what I see in walking down the street in the world, or, you know, are we pushing it? And he gave me the license to just run with it and do whatever I thought was right. So I've been extremely lucky on Euphoria, where I don't have to have my costumes approved by anyone. It's actually, I hear, kind of rare in TV, but I am given this like creative license to just do whatever I think is right. And we do make a working deck that has all the upcoming work, so all the departments can see the costumes and see what we have planned. But, you know, usually it's like I'm sending people to set, and I don't know that Sam even has the brain space to be able to like look at that working deck all the time. Right. I think, so my point is just that he trusts me so much, which is a huge gift, to be trusted by your director. And with the cast, there is a collaboration between myself and several of the cast members, where they have ideas, they bring ideas to the fitting, they're texting me, and we have a back and forth, like a great sort of like collaboration in that way. But yeah, for the most part, they also trust me, which is wonderful. Yeah, so I feel very supported in that way. And yeah, and they know that if they do have ideas, that they need to come to me with enough time to be able to execute those suggestions, rather than 5 minutes before they go on camera. Yeah, so it's been such a joy, honestly, that everyone on the panel can, I'm sure, attest to, working in television is can be extremely grueling. You know, we're talking like sometimes like 16+ hour days, but the reward on Euphoria specifically is that everyone is so kind and collaborative, and it's been just such a great journey with the teams and all the departments in creating the show. Even though it's a lot of work, the work is fun and creative, and you know, that's all you can really ask for on a job.
That is true. It is an amazing group. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Sam and the actors, and it's just, you can feel the passion. It emanates from them. It's really very inspiring, actually. I'd love to talk about the creative hacks that you have come up with to solve emergencies while you're working. And I've heard such amazing stories from costume designers and production designers of how they, you know, something breaks at the last minute, or the button pops off right as you're about to shoot. And I'd love to know, Gemma, what is your favorite way that you have solved a creative emergency on your current show, or even throughout your amazing career?
Mostly, I mean, particularly with television, you know, as we are roaring along for the next day and the next day and the next day. So really, it's my poor standby that gets done with that. I've got to say, I'm trying to think hellishly of some tale to regale you all with, but to be honest with you, I mean, the worst thing is when, you know, this has happened to me more with movies, but when you find you've showed the director everything the night before and everyone's happy, and you come in the morning and then they stand there and they fiddle about and then they won't do anything, the camera's up, and finally the camera's going, they go, should be pink, that wall, and you but, you know, last night, this beautiful midnight blue was exactly what you loved and what you wanted. And then either you're in a situation where everybody has to do something about it, you know, depending on your budget and your time. But I don't think that would ever happen on television. I mean,
probably not, no.
It's only ever happened to me on a film. But in terms of buttons popping and little things happening, fortunately, that really is not my problem. I did recently just do a film with a guy called called The Outfit, which was like a short, fast film. And that was really fun because, in fact, I was on set a lot, which I haven't been for such a long time. And I could sort of see that happening and things breaking and what have you. But you just have to use intelligence, don't you? You just have to, I don't know. But I have to say, I'm not on set regularly enough for that to be my problem, thank God.
And does anyone else have any clever problem-solving anecdotes? Because I always love hearing these stories. Okay.
Yeah, we had a problem on It's a Sin. We lost a location literally the day before we went to shoot in it. And it was a location where we were building estate agents in there. So right at the last minute, I went into the prop master's office, and I was like, right, great idea. We're now going to turn your office into estate agents. And literally we had like, I don't know, 18 hours to do it. And turfed all their desks out, repainted it, brought in our props, put all our files that we'd done for the windows with all the houses advertised and everything, and put some plants in there, and hey, it worked. It was good. It was good in the end. So it's sometimes it's a lot of like last minute things if locations fall through, and then you're trying to find something at the very last minute. And on It's a Sin, we had this school where we were partly based. So we could quickly jump in there if there was a location, because there was so many. There was 200 and odd sets, and so it was a really good stopgap that if something fell through, we could immediately sort of pounce in there and recreate something really fast.
And oftentimes the final product is better for it, even though you wouldn't have chosen that turn of events. I have found in my own career, sometimes those last minute changes, even though they're very unwelcome at the time, they are sort of that last flourish on the project, right? And Kalina, you were raising your hand. But do you have a story too?
Yes, I do. It's from Grey Gardens. It's still HBO. And it was, we were doing it in Toronto, and we got the wrong wallpaper, but we didn't know that. It was close enough. And they put two for the main room, and the Scenics put 2 of the rolls up, and they said, you got to come down and see it. And I freaked out because it had a stripe in the middle of it. And my reaction was, oh my God, it looks like pajamas. I am not having a pajama room, in the main room where with these 2 wild women. Anyways, there was so much going on. And I just looked at my scenic chart and I said, we're going to have to pull a plain color. We have very little time. The schedule was really intense on that show. And he said, and I said, I really love the background. I really love this royal purple. What can we do? And he said, I have a technique I can create more depth to it. And I said, go for it. And that's what we did. And it became the iconic color of the movie. And it's so funny because it is a much better choice than the wallpaper. But it really happened in the 11th hour and really happened because we got the wrong wallpaper.
And in that case, are you drawing that wallpaper from the documentary, from the actual space that existed in real life?
The documentary only covers one period of their life, which is after they remodeled their house.
Remodeled, right?
Yes, after they got money to clean it up. We actually had 4 periods. There's very little about what it looked like in the 30s.
Right.
And as you know, Edie is a very unreliable narrator. So if you go by her description of the house, you can kind of, there was a lot of freedom in it. But
yes, I imagine that was a beautiful, just gorgeous work. And in closing, I would love to talk about, when you're able to watch your shows when they're done and as a fan, and you're sitting back and you're allowing the content to just stream into your brain. Are you able to enjoy your work and feel proud without being critical? Are you able to watch and say, that is beautiful, we really pulled off something special? Or are you constantly reimagining and thinking like, oh, if I could have just done this last tweet? What is that experience like for you? Maybe start with Heidi.
I've had both feelings. It depends on the project. With Euphoria, it's so fast moving. It's the kind of thing where I have to dress people head to toe because I never know what we're going to see. And sometimes I see like this much of a shoulder, and other times I see the whole look. So I think if I'm watching the series and there's any regrets, it's that, I used an amazing outfit in a scene where we end up seeing like this much, and then a lesser favorite in a scene where we see tons of it. So it's just with the nature of that particular show, if I ask the questions ahead about what we'll see, they can never tell me.
They won't know. Right. And that's all out of your control, obviously. And how about you, Kalina?
Me. I absolutely enjoyed every minute watching Lovecraft. That, I have to say, is probably one of my happiest experiences of watching a show. I do tend to be very critical. I cannot watch my interviews. You know how they add these interviews with you? I cannot watch those. Those are very, very painful for me.
Like the behind the scenes making of
behind the scenes stuff is really painful, and I find that very difficult. But watching the sets is always fun because, and yes, you take notes, and yes, you could do some certain things better. But television is so difficult, so complex because of the lack of time, that to even get 90% of your vision, it's time to pop up the champagne, as far as I'm concerned, So for me, because we had such an amazing experience on Lovecraft, I have to say I was incredibly proud of what we achieved. Could we have done better? Sure, but give us another 6 months.
More time and more money, right?
Yeah, sure.
I love that. And how about you, Emma? When you're watching Perry Mason and the expanse of all those people dressed in those beautiful clothes, it just must be very moving for you.
I agree. I think you move so quickly on television, and there's what you think it's going to look like. And then when you have the opportunity to watch it, there's often moments where you do feel like kind of very proud and appreciative of what everybody came together to do, but there's often critical moments as well. I definitely think I kind of gravitate towards that because it's always a learning experience on how to do something better or how to approach something moving forward. I think with Perry in particular, we covered so many different worlds and scenes that I would forget things in episodes that we had shot, like massive scenes I would forget they were in. And so watching it was quite entertaining because I'd be like, oh, I forgot there was a 400-person funeral at the end of this one. There was already a war and there was something else. And so that's nice to see the scope that we covered for sure. But you have to quiet the critical brain watching it.
At least for a moment, but then also take notes for the next season. And, hopefully it'll be maybe a little easier next time. Probably not. And Lynsey, how about you? How do you feel about it? Obviously your show is not going to have a season 2, but are you able to look at it sort of as its kind of piece of narrative and just feel proud for this incredible story that Michaela, was brave enough to share?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I watched it. I absolutely loved it as a viewer. And for me to see my costumes was, a very proud moment for me. It's something right from the beginning when I had the scripts. I loved the characters. I loved the narrative. I couldn't wait to get started on it. And I was excited all the way through filming. So to see it at the end is always great. And, it was one of those shows that we're saying TV moves so quickly. And we shot all 12 episodes at once, which was a nightmare because we were shooting here, there, and everywhere, and episodes were being rewritten all the time, scenes on the day, suddenly something would be created. So the pace that you're going at, and you have to trust in, your gut all the time, your instinct, okay, this has been, okay, let's go with this, let's go with that. So there's always that thing when it comes out that you're nervous because you're like, obviously this was done in the heat of the moment. I did what I could. Is it going to work? Is it going to pan out? You never know with the grade if colors are going to change. For me, color palette on the show was really, really important, and working with the backgrounds and the designs of all the scenes, the hair and makeup. But until you've seen it all together, how they've graded it, there is always that nervous point where you're like, are they going to have changed? Is it going to look a completely different color? But more importantly, like the job for me, it was all about finding vintage and one-off pieces, which I love doing. It's like finding treasure and a little trophy every time you find something great. So to finally see them on camera, that's captured for me for life. And I just get to look back at it, whenever I want to.
I love that. It's such a beautiful story. I keep telling everyone I know to watch it. It's just, it's really very, very important. So thank you for your work on that. And also another very important narrative is It's a Sin, which is so moving, especially during Pride Month, to watch this show, to see this kind of, for me, which was kind of a missing piece of history for the AIDS epidemic, but the experience of young British men, and you've captured it so beautifully and so specifically. What stands out to you when you see the show?
I suppose the first time I saw it, I got completely carried away with the emotion of it and the emotional journey it takes you on. Much more than obviously when we were working on it again. It's like TV. It was so fast pacing. And we had so many sets to complete. And, sometimes you didn't even get time to watch all the rushes. And so you were kind of like there, kind of when I saw it. But I was honestly taken on this amazing emotional journey that just completely floored me. And it really did sort of completely get to me. But yeah, I was incredibly proud of everyone who worked on it, the team. I think we just did an incredible job, really, because we all kept our sense of humor. It was all upbeat, and also it reflected an amazing script that Russell had spent 10 years writing. And it was the same thing. You kind of come to the end, and then you're like, and then you watch it, and you kind of forget. I forgot about half of the sets that we'd actually created. So it was, going on that journey again, watching it all. So it was an incredible experience, and being able to have, even though we had very little time, we did manage to get in a lot of the authentic detail that Russell had written about, and time to meet the people, like the lady who it was written about, Jill, having conversations with her about her true story. And what I actually found out later, which was really interesting, is one of my best friends had actually visited the Pink Palace when she was like 17 in London, kind of realised. So all these strange connections came after it was screened, which was fantastic. It was really interesting. And yeah, it was phenomenal. It really was. It was a once in a lifetime job, I think, in that sense, only because there was so much passion involved from so many people. And, and the actors really went with the script as well. And they were wonderful because they were such a bundle of joy as well, young, enthusiastic, every day bouncing about. And, and we were trying to reflect that as well in the programme of like being young and being in London and, the excitement of being a student and living together for the first time in an apartment. So yeah, it was wonderful, actually. It was absolutely wonderful.
Oh. Well, and that comes out, the energy is very palpable. And so that really, I think it really helped the project too. Congratulations.
Yeah, it was from everyone, everyone felt really passionate about the scripts. When, you got them, you literally couldn't put them down. And they hardly changed. There was only tiny little bits. They were kind of, and, You know, there was little tweaks here and there. You know, we had a lot of, you know, Russell was on board all the time. So we had lots of, you know, and we showed a lot of things all up front, and all the graphics was very important to tell the story.
It's beautiful.
But yeah, I mean, it was a lot. You were juggling a lot of plates all at once, you know, because also the big challenge was it was set in the Isle of Wight, and it was set in London, and it was set in New York, and we filmed all of it in Manchester, Liverpool, and Wales.
Wow.
So it was recreating all of those three places in a completely different completely different locations.
Wow,
so that was
total magic. Really just totally magical.
Oh, thank you.
No, it really, and what everyone does here is really just magic tricks one after another. And then finally, Gemma, I would love for you to reflect on your experience with your most recent effort, The Nevers. Are you able to sit back and enjoy the grandeur of your accomplishments?
I'm very, very proud of the Nevers, and we had to build a huge amount of it because actually, despite what we couldn't, that they wouldn't go to Manchester or they wouldn't go further north, which would have been a help in terms of older architecture, etc. So they were quite determined they wanted to stay in London for whatever reason. So it was great for me because it meant we built huge swathes of it, which was wonderful. But that also means that when you first sit down to watch it, even though you have been watching, you know, the Russians and everything, it's always a bit of a shock. And I find it quite hard to separate myself from the paint finishes and what have you. The first time round, when I come back the second time, then I can relax and watch it. But it was also, I think, for the Nevers, it's a quite complicated story. And so when I did finally sit and watch it sort of properly, it really helped the story because, to be honest with you, rather like I think everyone's been saying the same thing, that with television, the scripts kind of like it's hard to get them, you know, you're trying to sort of do everything as much as you can without real story. So it suddenly everything became much clearer. And now we're back on doing the next, they don't want to call it season 2. It's like the other half of season 1.
Right.
And so back sort of battling with these stories and trying to make sense of them, thinking, well, it worked last time, so hopefully it's going to work this time. But the challenge of it was huge, and I did have an absolutely fantastic crew as well. And I do have a lot of women in my department, which I love. And this year we've got a lot of women painters, which is really fabulous, doing fantastic work. And you know, my graphics, my set decorator, you know, they are a truly fantastic bunch of people. So which I couldn't do it without any of them, to be honest with you. So. I love the lot of them, and it's a great experience. That's why I've come back to do the other half, as it were.
And everybody keeps coming back for more, even though you know how hard it is. And that really speaks to your love for your craft and just how great you are at it. So thank you for being so excellent at what you do and for being great mentors and leaders in the business. And best of luck for Emmy season. And I hope voters take notice of your work.